So I'd love to start out just by asking you, what is accessible yoga?
What is accessible yoga? Well, that's a good question. It's kind of two things right now. I think of it as an organization that I've created based on the teaching I was doing, for the last 20 years, 25 years, working with people with disabilities. But I would say that accessible yoga is also just an inclusive program just to support yoga teachers who are trying to bring yoga to populations that aren't included in commercial or mainstream yoga classes.
Mm.
And so we're just trying to create kind of an underground culture of yoga that's outside of that mainstream world.
Mm. So do you see the images of the perfectly physically fit, yoga person doing very difficult postures? Are these like kind of the obstacle, would you say, in the direction that you're trying to go in?
Yeah, exactly. I think it's been unfortunate that yoga has been portrayed in that way as a purely physical practice, extreme, kind of like an extreme sport, and I love asana. I think asana is amazing and I teach it all the time, but I feel like asana is just part of this, huge world of yoga that is really more of a internal practice. And so I get concerned that people feel that they are not able to practice yoga because they see the image of the yoga practitioner as a extreme physical thing that only some people can do. And it's kind of honestly, I think it's based in, I'm going to say, white supremacy, actually, and capitalism, that that yoga has been, appropriated by Western culture and turned into something that it's really not. And so I think part of accessible yoga is trying to get back to what yoga is. I'm not trying to create something new with accessible yoga, but to actually go back to some more what I consider traditional aspects of yoga, which is that it's a spiritual practice, or even if you don't like the word spiritual, that, like I say, internal practice, working on calming your mind, connecting with yourself. I don't know if that makes sense.
That makes total sense. What you said is so interesting to me. I just want to ask a follow-up on that, related to capitalism or white supremacy, as you said. How do you connect those dots?
Well, I mean, if you look at the way that yoga has been used and the way that a lot of large corporations are now using yoga to sell clothing and advertising. I mean, we're talking about big money. Yoga is a multi-billion-dollar industry. And in the West, money gets a lot of attention. That's where, and things are used or appropriated to sell things. And that's what's happened with yoga. It's like the physical advanced asana that is used to sell clothing and a whole lifestyle. It's a yoga lifestyle now. And I think that's a part of the world we live in. I'm not saying it's bad. I mean, it's okay to do that. It's okay to sell clothes and to market yoga, but I think we need to have more consciousness about it. So I'm not trying to be critical of it. It's just be conscious that yoga and the way we perceive yoga is based on something that we're being sold. It is very consciously being marketed to us as a particular thing. And I think actually integral yoga as well has more of a full history, of an understanding of what yoga is as a larger path rather than just asana. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense.
I keep asking you.
Yeah. What I think about really is kind of labeling and how we make decisions in our lives of what we choose to do based on the labels that we want to be associated with. So, for example, like, do I want to be seen as a yogi myself, or is that something acceptable with my self-image? So it's like this sensitive self-image, and really being concerned about what other people think of me dictates what choices I make in my life. And I think that's even much of the reason why yoga is, predominantly dominated by females, because it's more acceptable for women to, I go to yoga class, that's normal. If you're a man, you go to yoga class, although that's changing, it's seen a little bit more as being outside of the box, right?
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, in a way, what you're talking about is also the impact of marketing, which we're talking about, and marketing has to do with how is something perceived. In marketing, what's used is the idea of aspirational models of marketing. So there's an image shown, and you want to have that lifestyle, so you buy that product to look like that person, to be like them. And so I think that's part of why men, I think, don't feel comfortable in yoga, is because of marketing, but also then the culture has followed that, and mostly it's women that are practicing now. I don't really know why that is exactly, but I think for all of us, I mean, there's benefit really, I think, to anyone practicing yoga. I mean, really, it's just transformed my life, and I've seen so many students who've benefited from it. So I feel like if we can just somehow show the world the possibility that yoga offers, not just within asana, not just adapting poses, but actually looking at how we can apply all of the different practices of yoga in our lives, I think it can just open up so many possibilities for people, that, people who would never think of yoga per se because they don't think they fit that image.
Right.
Yeah.
Going back to the population that you focus on, and I think, pretty much all of us that are yoga practitioners and teach, we get the question, or we run in with those who have never done a yoga class before, and they say, oh, I'm not flexible. I can't, based on the images that you're talking about and all of that. So how do you respond to that as like, okay, I'm going to be the entrance way into kind of allowing someone to take that step and, begin a life of yoga?
That's a perfect question. I mean, I think that's exactly what we're facing, and I am concerned about, because I think that, really there's a lot of people practicing yoga now in the world, but really there's so many who aren't. And I feel like, those are the people that I'm interested in reaching, people that aren't practicing, people who don't think they can do it. And so I really want to find that way, find the way to teach yoga in a different way, or make it inviting to people who don't think they can practice. I mean, and especially people who have been marginalized. So I'm particularly interested in people who feel like they're excluded from mainstream yoga culture, and in fact excluded from culture and society in general. I just feel like, that's where I'm interested in bringing yoga. So my work's been mostly with people with physical disabilities, but I'm also, and accessible yoga is really more than that. We're working on supporting yoga teachers that bring yoga to any marginalized groups, or groups that haven't been served currently, or aren't currently served by yoga. So yoga in prison, or yoga in hospitals, whatever. It's just people that, aren't going to yoga classes already. And I don't know how exactly to bring yoga to those populations, but that's what I'm pursuing. And I would say that the way I like to do it is to support people that are doing it already. So I don't want to tell other people how to do it necessarily, but I'd like to find out what's working out there and talk to those people. And so that's what our conferences are. We run 2 large conferences a year, and the conferences are like gatherings of, usually have around 20 presenters who are working in this field, this very large, field of accessible yoga, kind of like yoga for everyone else world. And I get to listen to them, and they get to listen to each other, and they network and connect, and we educate each other. And it's quite beautiful, to hear what's already happening out there. There's so much amazing work happening in this world of accessible yoga. So many yoga teachers and organizations are serving outside of that mainstream culture, but they often don't get the attention and don't get money. So I think that's really another big issue, is like policy, and really how do we support yoga going to those communities? Not because it feels good, but because those communities are already engaged in some way, and they may need our support. So I mean, I think there's so much to do. It's not just, it's a marketing question. How is yoga perceived out there? How are we portraying yoga? But also, how do we support people within those communities that are practicing and are teaching, rather than also there's kind of another challenge of being like the white savior thing of like going into a community and trying to fix something or serve something that you don't really understand, and that's not the issue either. I think it's really empowering people. In fact, accessible yoga began because I was frustrated that people with disabilities weren't taking teacher training programs, and so I created a teacher training to train people with disabilities to be yoga teachers, with the hope that they would then go back to their communities and bring yoga there, which many of them did, So.
Is it possible to, teach that portion of the population without kind of having lived that experience yourself, right? Like if you're not a marginalized part of the population, so to speak, can you still stand in front of that class and be of genuine service, or do you really have to stand in their shoes in order to be effective?
I mean, I think that yes and no. Like you can to a point. I think you can serve as best you can, but I think you have to begin by being honest about your position and your privilege and what you've experienced. Personally, I mean, I'm a gay man, and so I feel like I've had some experience of being marginalized in some ways, but as a white man, I haven't experienced some, I have a lot of privilege. So to me, I have to be honest when I'm teaching about where I'm coming from and what I know. And then I can just offer opportunities for people to then explore themselves. But really, I think my main goal is to train other yoga teachers within communities and support them as much as I can, so that they can figure it out themselves. Like, I don't want to come in with the answers, but I just don't feel like there's many organizations out there supporting that. I mean, we have this like incredibly powerful commercial yoga world. That's where all the marketing is coming from. They're creating imagery and sending a message of what yoga is. And then you have, kind of some policy organizations like Yoga Alliance that I think are trying to do better, and I'm trying to work with them. I think they're doing okay now. But I don't really see any support for the grassroots yoga, right? To bring yoga to the people. That's what I'm basically an anarchist. Yeah. That's true.
Why do you put yourself in that category, and why are you like lit with this fire? Like, is it from some kind of personal experience that you have? Is it that your priorities are kind of differently aligned?
I don't know. I think it's a combination of things. I think that I came into yoga in a slightly unusual way, which is that my background is in AIDS activism. When I was young, I was in my late teens and 20s, coming out of the closet during the AIDS crisis in the 80s and 90s. And so my experience in that time and my kind of, like growing up time was very unusual. I think that most people didn't have that experience of like basically being surrounded by people who were sick and dying. And my friends were like, I literally lost most of my friends at that time, and my best friend died in 1995, and I spent time, those early years working in AIDS hospices and marching on the streets in demonstrations and getting arrested, and it was frustrating, but also very powerful. I mean, there's a lot of benefit in that experience, and that I saw how to organize community. I saw the benefit in grassroots organizing and in listening, really coming together as a community and just listening to each other rather than having a hierarchy of power, which I feel like is what most systems that we work within are. So I'm just still interested in that. And then yoga really saved me, and I feel greatly indebted to yoga for giving me a way to find some peace of mind myself. So what I'm interested in is then giving that to others. I feel like I owe that back, to the world, is to try to bring yoga to people who need it. And we all need it. And especially anyone who's feeling like they don't have it, or they don't have a way, maybe anyone who feels trapped, who they don't feel like they have tools to deal with their struggle. Those are the people I'd like to bring yoga to. So I do feel kind of indebted for that, I guess. Yeah.
You spoke about, hierarchy that happens often.
Yeah.
And so even in a yoga class, right, that can happen a lot, right? There's the teacher and you're the student, so I'm going to kind of tell you what to do type of thing.
Yes.
So for you and for, our teachers in that role, how would you even define, a good yoga class to yourself?
Yeah, I mean, that's very much on my mind. Is what happens within the yoga class and how is that experience replicating an oppressive culture that may not be supporting people in their growth? And I think it's a big problem. And so actually what I do in my training is I ask teachers to reflect on that, to reflect on their role and their position, and also the way they feel about their students and whether they feel that their students have knowledge and wisdom or not. And how can you start to look at your students differently and see that potential and see that you're coming into that relationship in a more collaborative way to not just value your knowledge, but to value what they have to offer. And so that what happens is you create a relationship that's a mutually beneficial relationship with your student. Now, I realize that most of the time as a teacher, you're talking, right? You're like giving information, but really the way you say things and actually what you feel about what you're saying can really shift. So I can offer teachings in a way like just do this, command, or I can offer information as suggestions and exploration and possibility. And to be honest, that's also trauma-informed teaching. So that like a lot of these ideas are kind of coming out in different ways in yoga right now. I mean, trauma-informed teaching is kind of like a catchword right now in yoga because everyone has trauma. So we need to be conscious of that when we're teaching. But actually, trauma-informed teaching often means that you work in a more collaborative way with the student. You offer options rather than one way. And you're trying to give people more control over their body and over their lives through practice. Rather than just being told what to do, they actually they gain more authority over themselves. So that's an empowering approach. So I guess just to summarize, I would say that there's two words I use when I train teachers. I ask them to look at collaborating with their students and also to do so in a creative way, to approach teaching as creation, as a creative endeavor. And I feel strongly that yoga practice and yoga teaching is creative. And to me, spirituality is creativity, right? That when I have a background in art actually, which is weird because I don't do art anymore. But when I'm in yoga and in that space, it's the same feeling as when I'm making art. And it's this kind of, timeless, spaceless experience of being. And I feel like yoga brings you into that place and creativity brings you there. And I really start to see that there's an intersection between them and that creativity and spirituality really, really are the same, right? It's connecting with that source energy, that is within us through some activity. And I think yoga practice is a very concise, organized way of doing that. So I ask teachers to consider how can they approach teaching in a more creative way. And think of, rather than have a plan exactly, to understand, in a sense, master the material and then improvise. And I think that's what like a really masterful artist would do, or musician, right? You learn the scales and then you can really play.
Yeah, and what about the role of vulnerability too, right? As like a teacher, because you go and you don't plan on making a mistake, so to speak, or
I do.
There you go. Maybe that's the answer to my question. But I had to move into that space of like, okay, I can be vulnerable. I can show, and isn't that so important to a student also? Like when they're seeing a teacher and the way that you handle yourself when you, I guess, make a mistake, if we want to call it. Maybe that's more important than anything else that we teach.
I mean, if I'm actually practicing yoga and being authentic with myself, then I'm working on my ego, right? I mean, because ego is an obstacle to our enlightenment, to our self-awareness. So, I mean, I think it's good to have an ego, right? We need that in the world, but to think I'm perfect or better than you is just fooling myself and creating more suffering for myself. You know, it's just, it's not yoga. So I'd say I often think I'm better than everyone, but that's not helpful. You know, then half the time I think I'm worse than everyone. So it's like it's like a roller coaster ride. Did you do that too? I mean, if the mind just kind of goes like up and down.
Yeah.
To make me feel better. Oh, okay. But I mean, yeah, to be vulnerable is to be human and honest and try to connect with people in an honest way. And I think newer yoga teachers, it's harder, right? Like you're like nervous, but when you get over that, I think just be honest. Yeah.
A bit of a more technical question.
Oh, okay.
That someone would like to ask you, Jivana, is how to best accommodate folks with knee pain, knee replacements. Aside from patting the knees or skipping the kneeling positions, what might you suggest?
That really took it right down to earth.
Right? We could do that.
I know, right. I know, I kind of like to talk way up there. I had one thought, which is, this actually came up in the training that I finished today and came up yesterday. Actually, rather than patting the knee, what's really helpful is to actually put a pad under the shin and to put weight on the shin. So like say you're kneeling on all fours. Is that the same thing? Kneeling? No. Say you're on all fours, actually like cat-cow preparation. Instead of just putting a blanket under the knees, you can put a blanket that doesn't go under the knee. It just ends right at the shin. So the pressure is actually on the bone. And that's generally safer for all the joints, is the pressure is not on a joint, but on a bone. Yeah. So I don't know if that's helpful. Hopefully that's helpful.
Great. Okay. I wanted to ask you about the award that you received from the UN and what that experience was like.
Oh, it wasn't an award.
It wasn't an award.
I wish.
So what was it?
Yeah. No, it was a Nobel Peace Prize. No. No, it was no award, but it was an award in a sense in that they asked me to teach there. So I got to go and teach yoga there.
Okay.
Yeah, that was a couple of years ago. I was invited to the UN in Geneva to celebrate the International Day of Persons with Disabilities. They were having a big event. It was like December 3rd is actually an international holiday that the UN created a few years ago. And it's a day to celebrate disability awareness and disability pride, actually. And so I got to teach yoga to people there at the event. And it was amazing. And I got to hear the other people that were there. It helped me understand a little more about disability rights and the disability rights movement. And actually Swami Sudananda here at the ashram has a lot of experience in that. I learned from here this weekend as well. But it's interesting how disability rights, and I would say human rights in general, intersects with yoga philosophy. And I think it comes down to this idea of that we all have some basic spiritual essence within us, and that's equal within all of us. That everyone has that same like truth, regardless of someone's physical or mental capacity, that they're still whole within there. And I feel like the disability rights movement is very clear in that regard, that we're all equal, even though many laws in the world or many governments do not treat people with disabilities as equals at all. So I feel like that yoga in a way can help us find that humanity in each other and in all people, and help empower people who do not feel empowered, who have been left out, right?
Speaking about yoga and more of this like whole way, is there an aspect of yoga that even kind of incorporates our relationship with those who maybe are experiencing life completely differently from us? And so how to go about that? Okay, I don't know what it's like to be you, but maybe, like you said, there's something also that's in the same in all of us. Yeah. So can we focus on connecting in that level of sameness? Or just, yeah, what type of yoga is that, like in our interpersonal relationships?
That's yoga. That's beautiful. I think what you just said, that part of yoga is, like I mentioned before, we're trying to, in a way, move beyond ego, and ego is separation, right? Ego is teaching us that we're better or worse than others. And then that can be projected outwards. So like society's ego does the same thing, where society may consider people with disabilities as better or worse than everyone else. So you often see people with disabilities portrayed as either put on a pedestal, like superhuman, transcending whatever problem they have, or you see them as less than, subhuman, with no power and no rights. And you see this happening a lot with other oppressed groups. They're either put way up or way down. And I think that seeing people as equal is important. I think equity is really the answer. But that's not to deny their experience. So I think part of what happens is something called spiritual bypass, where we say, oh, it's all good, and we're all equal, as if the suffering is not there. And that's not the point. The point is that the suffering is there. People do have pain and challenges in their life. And we need to be real about that, but also in the end to know that underneath that, they're human and they're equal. Everyone is equal in that regard. So there has to be a balance. It's really a paradox, actually. In fact, I wrote an article about yoga and human rights, and that I think it's on my blog somewhere, Accessible Yoga. But what I said in the article is that there's a paradox there in that we're all equal and yet we're all different, and be able to hold that. At the same, hold those two things together is yoga to me, right? And that's what I would say accessible yoga is for me, is be able to be in a room with people and say each person is different, they have different needs, they've had a different life experience and different challenges, but we can come together in a unifying way and share that moment together. In fact, one of the things I'm kind of obsessed with in yoga classes, it sounds kind of weird, but I love the idea of mixed classes where people of different abilities are practicing together. And I feel like yoga right now is pretty segregated. We think we're teaching different levels because we see yoga as a physical exercise or something. So we have advanced and beginning classes and chair yoga and all that. And that's okay. But I also think there's a really beautiful opportunity for yoga to be a unifying force. People can come together and practice together of different abilities. So I train yoga teachers to bring people who are practicing in chairs right into traditional mat classes. So I teach skills for teachers to do that. How do you have someone in the room practicing in a chair alongside people on a mat? Because I think that creates a unified experience, right?
Yeah. I think about, from the perspective of a teacher, going into a class, and in a way, it seems, easier or more simple to just focus on like the physical posture, the exercise portion of it. But I think what you're talking about is so important in terms of seeing yoga as a deeper thing, a spiritual experience. And more than that, I think this is the real thirst, that people have, is to have, a spiritual experience in their lives. So from the perspective of a teacher, how to kind of step forward into acknowledging that, like what the possibilities of what your class can be, pretty much. It can be more than just this exercise. But that can be an intimidating thing for a teacher to move into that space.
Yeah. Right, and that can also be exclusive in a way of people who don't consciously want spirituality. Like some people don't want spiritual teachings, or they're not interested in religion, and they feel that yoga it doesn't have to be, and we can make it more universal by taking that out. And so I think we need to find other ways of talking about that. I think spirituality is part of life, and we separate it as if it's something else. I think it's the basis of what's already going on. So you can't really take it away. So it's there in asana, right? Your spirit is there in asana. Your spirit is there in everything you do. And the yoga teachings actually talk about working with the mind. So that's what I focus on. I don't usually talk about spirituality so much directly, And I recommend maybe in public classes that teachers don't either, but rather talk about working with the mind, either becoming more peaceful or connecting with yourself, connecting with the heart. These are ways of coming home to yourself. Like, these concepts are maybe more universal and understandable and are still spiritual concepts, right? That's like what the yoga teachings teach us, that if we just need to work on the mind, calm the mind, and the other part will just naturally be there, because that's who we are anyway. Right? If that helps.
Yeah, I love that. It makes me think too of just asking questions too during a class. Like, okay, you fell out of the balancing posture. Like, how did you feel about that? Like, what happened there with your mind? Those types of like inquiries, just to ask.
And I see that happening in yoga classes, even the ones that are very extremely physical. I just took a class the other day that was like so physically challenging for me. It was like a vinyasa flow, and I part of me was feeling like, first of all, why was I even there? But because it just was so hard. But then I see the benefit in challenging my mind that way through challenging my body. So I understand that. I think there's so much benefit in doing doing challenging physical practice, right? It can really help you work on your mind. But I think you have to just keep that in mind, that sure, you're strengthening the body and you're working on the mind, but eventually the body is going to die, so what's going to happen then? Or you'll even get older. What happens when you get really good at those asanas and then you have an injury, or you turn 50 like I did, a year and a half ago, and all of a sudden I feel really old. So it's just, things happen, and you can still be a yogi. Like, even if you can't move at all, right? Even if you can't move your body at all, you can be a yogi.
Yeah, I like even just thinking the idea that life is yoga.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
I don't think that's so far-fetched.
No. Sometimes I have my students practice in their mind. So like, you could imagine an asana. You just go through in your mind. It's really fun, like with sun salutation, to go through mentally, just lie in bed, practice sun salutation in your mind, and see if you can concentrate on it for like the whole series. It's a great practice, because you're actually, first of all, you'll feel the benefit too, right? Visualizing is powerful. And also it's a good practice of concentration to see if you can get your mind focused for that period of time. And it shows, again, how much yoga is a mental practice, right? That you can get the benefit from just thinking about what you're doing. Yeah.
Let's see what else we got. Can you speak about your ambassador program?
Yeah, so we have Accessible Yoga Ambassador program is really designed as a way to give support to people who are doing the work of making yoga accessible. So that was my original intention with creating Accessible Yoga, was to support other teachers. Actually, it was selfish in the end. I wanted support, honestly. I just felt that there wasn't any organization to support me at that moment. I had just moved, and I didn't have a yoga family, a yoga community, and I was looking for support for my work, and I realized that I could create that for others, and create something that I wanted for myself too. So Accessible Yoga really was about a platform. So it started with the conferences, creating a platform for yoga teachers who I admire and who were doing that work. And then the ambassador program is just another level of that, of trying to empower people with our name, just like use our name and be an ambassador, and just connecting those people to this larger network of, and we are all over the world. I mean, it's incredible. Like, it's not like I created something. It was more just like I noticed something that was there, and I found all these amazing people. I mean, like, we have Accessible Yoga ambassadors everywhere, and I think we have at least close to 1,000 formal ambassadors, but then we have more than that on our Facebook groups. We have 22 Facebook groups in 10 languages, and there are people connecting really, literally all over the world who are already doing the work, so it's not like, I do train teachers, but I haven't trained that many, and these are also people that just were already teaching and making yoga accessible, and they've kind of come to connect to this family of people who are interested in that, in bringing yoga to people who don't currently have access. Yeah.
Have you learned anything through this about sharing? Because it makes me think of, like, when I'm in school and, you're telling, don't cheat, don't share answers, at any of that. And then one of my favorite parts when I became a yoga teacher was more of this atmosphere of, oh yeah, if you like something that I do, sure, take it, and vice versa. So is that something that you've kind of learned through the ambassador program, would you say?
Yeah, through accessible yoga in general, I've learned about that. And one of the ways I work with my ego is to give away the name accessible yoga and to not feel like an ownership over that, and to really encourage people to use it, encourage people to call their classes accessible yoga. It's not like, my ego wants to own that, but my heart wants to give it away. So that's what I really focus on, is just like giving it away. And that's what I think what you're saying about generosity. And I get so much back. Like the minute I give something away, it comes back to me, even more. It's been incredible, actually.
It seems almost hard to believe, I think, until you actually experience it.
Yeah.
When you experience, I give without thinking, and then all of a sudden it's like, wow, all these things came up that you could never have strategized, right? Like you build a relationship with these people that leads to more opportunities, and you wouldn't have been able to make a game plan of it, but just through this mentality of sharing, it came about.
Yeah, and that sharing isn't just, to me it's based on yoga practice, actually. It's not just because I'm not really that nice, I don't think. You know what I mean? It's not like being a nice person. It's just that because I'm trying to practice yoga. And to me that means that I'm working on myself. And like I said, my ego gets in the way of my happiness. And I think I said that, but if not, I'm saying it now. Ego gets away with my happiness, and so I struggle with controlling my ego by giving away what I have, and also by focusing on others as much as I can. So part of my practice is through social media. I don't generally share myself and my own practice very much. I'm constantly trying to show other people and what they're doing. So basically through accessible yoga and our social media platforms, we just show other people, just constantly share other people's work. Basically, that's what we do. We just like share it. Look at this person. Look at this person. Look at this person. Like that's how it works.
And is that maybe what we're doing in a yoga class too? Like, well, maybe we're just sharing our own practices. Could it be as simple as that?
Definitely. I love that. I that came up in our weekend training as well. Of like someone in the group said, I don't call myself a teacher, and I don't say I'm teaching yoga. I'm sharing my practice. And I haven't evolved to that place yet, personally. My ego still wants to be a teacher, but maybe someday. But I do think we're doing that. We're sharing our practice. We're exploring together. Yoga is fun, and it should be. If it's just all serious all the time, it gets so boring. So, a yoga class should be a time to come together with people that we care about and show them something we like to do and learn from them. It's an exchange. So you're giving away and you're getting back, right? Because as a yoga teacher, you know that you get more benefit than the students do, generally. It just feels so amazing to teach yoga. It's incredible.
It's just this attitude of lightness. I'm very interested in, because it's so refreshing when you meet someone else or have an experience where it's just this lightness and almost a wonder, for life. And I think it's such an opportunity to bring that into the world through teaching, if you can manifest it. But what's in the way of a teacher kind of getting to that place of lightness?
I'll tell you what's in the way a lot is trying to fix things and heal and cure and solve problems. I say that's the biggest obstacle for me, especially if you're working with people with disabilities or who are struggling. It's so easy to think that you're going to come in and solve something, even if you actually might know something that would help. It's not your place. You can share what you know, or you can share, and then you let it go. It's up to the person to decide. You're not responsible. We're not responsible for someone else's journey. And I feel like we think we're helping. And in fact, it's that concept of like helping versus serving. That very, very dangerous trap. And I think a lot of yoga teachers get into that trap. They're helping. And that's not really useful. It's not useful for the student, and it's not useful for you. In fact, you'll end up burning out, right?
This humility, I think is what you're talking about. And I think something else you shared also made me think of it when, we compare ourselves to each other. And, half of the time you spend thinking that, you're above, and then the other half that you're below, this type of thing. For me, the answer there is humility in the sense that, like, I have no idea what someone else's experience is like in life. And the more I can just not really pay attention to it and focus on it, like, and just concentrate on what I know, which is the self, the better off, I'll be. But it's we get distracted with this comparison game. And to me, it's a lack of humility, because it's just impossible to know where we stand compared to another person anyway. So why enter that game?
Yes. I think the best thing is to help that person ask themselves. Do you know what I mean? So to me, a lot of what yoga is about is like giving someone tools to explore in their own life how to solve their problems, how to find the answers. So if someone comes to me with a problem and they say, I'm suffering, I have this problem, I'll often say, well, what do you think you should do about that? And I might find different ways of saying that. And that's basically what I try and say. Is like, ask them. Or maybe rather than just ask directly, say, okay, well, maybe you need to just do some practice, get quiet, and then ask yourself. But in the end, the answer is coming from you. I don't really have the answer. I can tell you what's helped me. That's fine. I can share what I do. But generally, I would just turn it back. Turn it back to you. Because it's dangerous for so many reasons, like you said, not just humility, but if you think that you're healing, that you're curing, and that you're helping, you're setting yourself up for later failure, actually, right? It's your ego is getting built up. It's just, the ego will find any opportunity it can to get puffed up, and then it pops, and you're just left lower than you were before. And that's been my experience. So.
Maybe we have time for one more question here. What's one of Gurudev's teachings that you found to be most useful to you?
I mean, there's so many. I would just say, his focus on service, and that's kind of the theme that I think we've been talking about here, which is service doesn't mean to me that you're just giving everything all the time, but that you actually know how to give, right? That you know how to take care of yourself, and you know how to offer to others, to give back at the same time. So there's some kind of lesson there that he was a great example of that to me, and it's something he talked about a lot, to understand what does that actually mean to be of service to the world. It's something I'm trying to figure out. So.
Do you think that, like, we're created to serve in a way?
Yeah, I mean, why else are we here? I don't know what's going on.
When you were talking about, your personal story and how you were involved in activism when you were younger, it made me think that, like, you kind of saw behind, like, the veil, or you experienced something, like you experienced service, and there was no way of going back. And you've just continued to go forward in it, because it was such a change from, finding purpose in your life, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think just being exposed to illness and death early on, and then to Swami Satchidananda's teachings at the same time, it really helped me see that the mind and its games don't really work, and there's got to be another way. And I think that's what yoga teaches. Yoga teaches us to be to question all the time and analyze the way we're working, the way we're thinking, and to try to connect with a deeper place within us, and then to experience that, to experience peace and contentment, and to really know that that's enough, that we don't need to achieve these external things for happiness to come. They come through service, through a serviceful life that allows you to be peaceful with yourself. And it's a challenge. I mean, it's very hard. So I'm not saying that's easy. I'm struggling with it, like, a lot, But I'm trying.
Yeah. one of the best things that I heard when I first came to the ashram, or when I read Gurudev's teaching, that it was, let nothing disturb your peace. Even if God comes, don't let God disturb your peace.
Yeah,
and I was just never had someone, say anything like that and, prioritize peace to that extent, where it's like this peace above all.
That's beautiful. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I got a ways to go. Let's put it that way, because things bother me all the time, especially politics and, that kind of stuff. But, I know that in the end, if I obsess about it, it's not helping. I try to find something to do. So what can I do within the world that I have, within the people that I can touch? How can I, support them? And that serves me. That's how I get back. I get something back when I'm able to support and give something away. Yeah.
In terms of actually making progress, do you think more progress is made from like a place of like frustration, or from a place of like lightness, like I accept how everything is, but still I'm going to try to move in a positive direction?
I'm asking myself that question all the time. I think that is essential to ask. I think both ways work. And I think that we just need to, each of us, ask ourselves, how can I best serve? And it could be by demonstrating on the street and blocking traffic and being angry and stopping pain from occurring in the world, stop destruction from happening. It can also be through creation and doing positive things. So I feel like both sides are effective, and I think we just need to we need to all do the best we can. There's no one answer. I also think sometimes we can act in a strong way, and sometimes we can be softer. But that's what I'm trying to figure out, actually. So I don't know. You need to tell me.
Well, I think like you said, allowing everyone to make those decisions for themselves. Like what is right to you to do, and just follow that. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.